Have you ever noticed that the words nephew and cousin are used in a little bit of a funny way in the King James, a way that can be misleading? Nephew's easier, so we'll start with that one, but cousin presents some more challenges and I think might cause a little more misunderstanding because of language change. Understandest what thou readest in the King James Version. After this video, you will do so a little bit better. Let's start, like I said, with nephew. I will use not the Oxford English Dictionary, but Logos Bible software to search the King James using my Raycast settings I'll talk about in some future video, Lord willing, for that word nephew. When we look over those uses, they start way back in Judges. It's not a super common word. It only occurs 4 times. I'm actually going to use the New Testament reference because that's just a little more fresh in my mind. 1 Timothy 5:4. God inspired Paul to write, "Rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father, and the younger men as brethren, the elder women as mothers, the younger as sisters, with all purity. Honor widows that are widows indeed. But if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home and to requite their parents, for that is good and acceptable before God." I mean, isn't that oddly specific? If there's any widows in your congregation and they have children that can support them, don't put them on the welfare rolls, as it were, the church welfare rolls. That makes sense. But nephews? Like, why nephews? Again, oddly specific, right? Let's look at other translations real quick. I will open up the text comparison tool in Logos, and I will go to that same passage. Wait a minute. 1 Timothy 4:16. 1 Timothy 4:16. And I'm seeing, keep a close watch on yourself in the teaching. Did I get the wrong passage? No. 5:4. Thank you very much. 1 Timothy 5:4. If a widow has children or grandchildren. The Geneva Bible has nephews also. King James, nephews. RSV, grandchildren. MEV, grandchildren. New King James, grandchildren. NASB 95, grandchildren. Critical text Bibles like the NASB and the RSV and the ESV are saying grandchildren. Textus Receptus Bibles like the King James, New King James, and Modern English Version are also saying grandchildren, except for the King James, which has nephews, and Geneva, which has nephews. Why? Let's take a look at the Greek word. If I click on my Scrivener text and I go to that relevant passage and look at it, if that's a widow, children, or here's the word has, okay, it's this word right here, ekganos. And I run a Bible word study on it. In the King James, it's only appearing once, and it's always translated nephews, but what does it mean? According to BDAG, it means, let's make that open on the whole side. It means descendants, I saw, yeah. Oh, grandchildren. The ancient versions understand it in the latter sense, 1 Timothy 5:4. They're saying that ancient translations like the Vulgate, and we can see that here, Vulgate is going to have, if she, that's the widower, the widow has children, or nepotes. Let's see what that meant in my Oxford Latin Dictionary, which I paid good money for in Logos for this very reason. It doesn't mean that. Nepotor? Nepotula. Okay, granddaughter, nepotulus. A grandson. Okay, that's got to be it. Okay, so interestingly enough, there does seem to me to be a relationship between that and nephew. I mean, can it be a coincidence that they start with the same 3 letters? I don't know yet. We'll find out in the Oxford English Dictionary. Everybody is saying that that word actually means grandson, however, a grandchild, and not nephew. So why does the King James have the word nephew? We need to go to the Oxford English Dictionary and look up that word nephew. Give ourselves a little more space here. Nephew is a son of a person's brother or sister, hence also a son of a brother or sister-in-law. Okay, that's exactly what I've got. I've got a nephew. He's the cutest little guy you could possibly imagine. He lives with my sister and my brother-in-law, of course, as well he should. I have a nephew who is the son of my sister. But let's look. Are there any other senses? Euphemistic and illegitimate son, especially of an ecclesiastic or cleric. No. That's like, the priest of the Catholic Church had a quote-unquote nephew that he used to hang around with a lot. No, actually, it's his kid. That's not what we're talking about here. A grandson, now rare and later use regional. And I skipped my regular step because we already know this, right? A nephew in contemporary English is a son of one's brother or sister, or of one's brother-in-law or sister-in-law. A grandson is what it used to be able to mean. It says it's now rare. I've certainly never heard that used in my lifetime. In 1903, they have an example of this being used for that. A daughter of a person's brother or sister, a niece, like nephew used to be the main form and niece didn't exist or didn't always get used. Well, that's weird. That's unclear. An extended use of prodigal, a descendant of a remote or unspecified kinship, a successor. Now that's interesting. Sometimes I search for 1611 to see if I can find the King James. No. But here is Miles Coverdale. That's not it's a translation of Erasmus's paraphrase of the New Testament. If they do this not, then are they not his, that is Abraham's nephews? That does seem to mean descendant. I get that. But very clearly, the Greek word here in 1 Timothy 5:4 means grandson, and the English word used to be able to mean grandson. That is now rare. I mean, I'm going to say, without having to check the now corpus, that's just not happening anymore. It doesn't mean grandson. This is definitely archaic. We most definitely have a false friend. Let's just look real quick at the other uses in the King James that I searched for. Not that. This, Judges 12:14, and he had 40 sons and 30 nephews. That's grandsons. That fits much better. Again, nephews would be oddly very specific here. He shall neither have son nor nephew among his people, nor any remaining in his dwellings. Like what kind of curse would that be? You're not going to have a nephew. Well, that's not a curse against you so much as a curse against your sister or your brother. No, this curse that they're talking about is you're going to have neither son nor grandson. I will rise up against them, saith the Lord of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and son and nephew, saith the Lord. That's son and grandson. Okay, so here are 4 instances of a very clear false friend, like the very definition of false friend. You're not going to get this unless you have exceptionally good reading skills and or knowledge of Elizabethan forms. They said nephew for the same thing for which we say grandson. That does make me wonder. I'm just going to trace this out. If I go to the OED and I look up grandson, how long does that form exist in English? Okay. It looks like the first instance they're finding is actually only in 1573, not that long before the King James translation. But that would actually be after the Bishop's Bible. Who knows when the very first time anybody said grandson was? I don't know. I'm curious about the etymology now. Like, where is this coming from? Why would it need to be invented if nephews were already there? Well, it's not really giving me an etymology. It's giving me grand. It just means great. Yeah, I don't think I want to trace that out any further. We definitely have a false friend, and in those 4 instances, you're just going to be misled. That's the way language works. Language changes in mysterious ways that you could not predict. Nephew seems like such a straightforward category. Why would it need to, I think, narrow from a relative of some kind that is in some way descended from your generation? Why would it narrow to this particular instance, a male child of your biological sibling or of your brother-in-law or sister-in-law? That's just what happens, and this is a classic false friend. So let's try the other one that I mentioned. Instead of searching for nephew in the King James, I'm going to search for cousin. There are only 2 instances, and this one is the one I'm most interested in. Luke 1:36. I'm recording this not too long before Christmas. I'm rounding out my false friends list, getting to some that I can't believe I haven't hit before. I mean, these are so obvious. And these are numbers, 96 and 97 on my list. Yes, I just took a break to check, and they are 96 and 97. That means we have 98, 99, and 100 left to go before December 31st. And Lord willing, on the morning of December 31st, you'll get number 100, which I think is pretty special and actually pretty important, among the most important and significant false friends that I will have put out. And it's one I wasn't even aware of until I sat down to write my book, KJV Words You Don't Know, which Lord willing is coming out in 2025 or maybe 2026 with Lexham Press. It's with my editor right now. Okay, let's get to cousin. In the OED, we skipped a step. We don't want to go to the OED yet. No, we want to go to the English. Behold, thy cousin Elizabeth, she hath also conceived a son in her old age, and this is the 6th month with her. What does a cousin mean? Well, let's look up the Greek word. Now, it looks like, according to Logos and the lexicons that I have, why do I not have BDAG there? That is so odd. This is another lexicon I do use on a regular basis. It's an heir to Little Scott Jones. It's comparatively recent, sometimes called Brildag, though the publisher doesn't like that. The Brill Dictionary of Ancient Greek, it says this word means blood relative, and it cites Luke 1:36. I want to look at others. Okay, relative, kinswoman. This is what I'm getting here. A female member of an extended family or clan, relative or kinswoman. Whereas, right, a cousin in contemporary English means a child of one's uncle or aunt. My aunt, who is my mom's younger sister by 10 years, had 4 daughters, and now they themselves are having children, getting married. It's really awesome. I remember when they were tiny babies, and I babysat them way, way, way back when. And now my cousins, they're my first cousins. They are on to adult things. Do I have any other cousins? My wife has some cousins. I mean, there are second and third cousins, and there's all this twice removed business, which I don't understand. You have to be really dedicated to genealogy to know what that means. I could look it up, but I'm too lazy to do so. I'm on another tack right now. This is odd, right? Is Elizabeth Mary's cousin? It's not impossible to have a cousin who is far older or far younger than you. And maybe back in those days before birth control, maybe it was more common, I don't know. But Elizabeth was substantially older than Mary. Normally, cousins are of a roughly similar age. Would that possibly lead you to consider this as a possible false friend? It didn't for me. I read the Christmas story many, many times and read this story in the Gospel of Luke in the King James many times, and it just never even occurred to me that cousin might be a false friend. I don't know when it actually first came across my attention, but if I go to modern translations for Luke, was it 136? Behold, your relative Elizabeth is in her old age, has also conceived a son. Tyndale has cousin, an old spelling of it. Geneva Bible has cousin. King James has cousin. All the modern translations, oh my goodness, they don't. The RSV has kinswoman. The MEV sticks with cousin. Now, that's the first edition. I wonder if they corrected this in the second edition. I can't easily check that right now. But the other TR-based translation says relative, and relative, it's all over the place here in the modern translation, or kinswoman, which matches the Greek, right? Because the Greek is less specific than cousin. That is, the son of my uncle or aunt, or son or daughter. So let us check the Oxford English Dictionary. I will move over to the OED, and I will look up that word. Cousin. Cousin, noun or adjective. Any collateral relative more distant than a brother or a sister, a distant relation, now frequently with modifiers such as distant or remote. Okay, so they're saying that at least frequently it requires that modifier in order to indicate that it's any collateral relative rather than specifically one that is the child of your uncle or aunt. It says this word cousin was formerly frequently applied to a nephew or niece. Interesting. And now nephew and niece have come in to take over its spot, but now always denoting a relative at least as distant as a first cousin. Let's go on in the senses here. And here's the special use: a child of the brother or sister of either of one's parents, a person with whom one has one or more, typically two grandparents in common. So I wonder when this entry, this is the revised 2019 entry. I'm surprised to see this mentioned here and not labeled as obsolete or at least rare, possibly regional, probably not. Let's see how long they go in history. 2012. It was common in, say, rural France for someone to spend all his savings to erase the debts of a remote cousin. Okay, I'm learning something. Cousin can still be used to refer to someone other than the direct son or daughter of your aunt or uncle. But again, it requires some kind of qualifier: remote, distant. The last one that they reference that doesn't have such a modifier is in 1747. Even this 1954 reference, an old Mrs. Thorogood, who it appeared was some kind of cousin. There needs to be some kind of modifier on the front of the word attached to it in order to indicate that it's not the standard use. And does that occur in the King James? I'm already forgetting. Open the King James to Luke 1:36, thy cousin Elizabeth. No, I think we have a false friend here, because I think that anybody reading this is going to assume that this means, anybody reading this today, practically anybody, except for those very rare, excellent readers who are very well versed in these things. And I certainly wasn't until I got deep into this stuff. Practically anybody reading this today is going to assume that this means Elizabeth is the child of Mary's uncle or aunt. And that isn't the case. That's not what the Greek word there means. And it's not what the King James translators were trying to communicate. That word cousin also showed up elsewhere in the passage. And her neighbors and her cousins heard how the Lord had showed great mercy upon her. That's Elizabeth. And they rejoiced with her. Is that the same Greek word? Yes, it is. So we are not talking about what we understand by the word cousins here. We're talking about relatives, kinswomen in this case. Isn't this a feminine word? Yeah, this is masculine. So this would include kinsmen as well. Relatives of Elizabeth were rejoicing with her over her giving birth successfully to John the Baptist. So we have two false friends in this video that are both familial terms. The first one was nephew, and through the vagaries of language change, vagaries just means, well, let's find out what it means. Okay, vagaries. It means an unexpected and inexplicable change in situation or in someone's behavior. That's it. Language, as John McWhorter says, isn't. It's always becoming. It's not like you can't pin it down at all. If that were the case, then nobody would be able to communicate at all, and nothing I would say would mean anything to you, and why would I bother? No, that's not the case. But language is slowly changing like the clouds, and you do not know the direction that it'll take. If you said to a person in 1611, no, the word nephew actually means the son of my, the son of my sister. And the word cousin means the son or daughter of my aunt or uncle, they would just look at you funny. Like, why should that have to be the case? We've got these perfectly good words that are serving perfectly fine. We need to use these words on a regular basis. Why would they change like this? Well, who knows? Nobody's in charge. The King of England didn't say one day, all right, my subjects, I shall change all of the words for familial relations in order to raise taxes. That's not it. Nobody knows. God knows why words change like this, but they do. It is so clear. And here's what you can't say, as what a lot of my commenters have recently been wanting to say. Well, the King James uses high English and excellent English. This is the way English ought to be spoken. And I'm like, well, do you do that? Do you, my King James only brothers and sisters out there, do you insist on calling your grandchildren nephews? I doubt it. Do you insist on using the word cousin to describe relatives that are beyond the level of, my aunt or uncle's children? I really highly doubt that you do this. If you're going to be consistent, though, if you really believe that the King James preserves high English and our English is degraded, then you should learn to speak in this way. I've never known anyone who has done this. That's just not the way language works. You will continue to use the word nephew the way you've always done it. You'll continue to use the word cousin the way you've always done it, even if you're strongly King James only, I absolutely guarantee you. We have a false friend, two false friends in the King James, numbers 96 and 97. And now hopefully thou understandest what thou readest in the King James Version a little bit better in those 4 places for nephew and 2 places for cousin, a total of 6.